Some animes spend entire arcs trying to make you care about a character. Frieren can do it in a few minutes. And the crazy part is, these characters don't even do anything special. They don't save Frieren, they don't change a goal, they don't hand her some crucial piece of information she needed to move forward. They just exist. And somehow, that's enough to make you remember them. Today I'm breaking down exactly how Frieren pulls this off, using two characters you will meet in a moment. One of them barely gets any screen time, the other one is one of the most contradictory characters in the entire show. But before we get into those two, there's something Frieren does at a fundamental level that almost no other anime does. Something so simple, it's almost embarrassing that other shows miss it. Most animes treat side characters like furniture. Usually, they just exist to make the main character look better, deliver the necessary context, and occasionally die to give the hero emotional motivation. Their whole purpose is to add something to the main character's life, and then they are gone. Frieren doesn't do that. This show makes you feel like these characters had entire lives before they ever crossed paths with Frieren. They have their own goals, their own journey, and their own contradictions. And when they leave, whether it's because of death or simply choosing a different path, it actually hits you. Because Frieren gives its side characters a breathing space. It just lets them exist. In episode 6 of season 2, the main cast is sidelined for 9 full minutes, almost half the episode. The show just hands the story to the side cast and says, "Trust me." Sien is a perfect example of this. He joins Frieren's party, helps them as much as he can, and then eventually parts ways to search for his friend. His goals are treated with just as much importance as the main cast. It's so rare to see this. A side character whose purpose isn't to serve the protagonist, but to live their own story. One Piece tried to do something similar, but never fully committed to it. When characters like Nami, Zoro and Sanji join Luffy's crew, the story makes it clear that they aren't following him purely to support his dream. Each of them has their own personal goal. They choose to help Luffy, but they are also chasing something of their own. But as the story progresses, those individual ambitions slowly fade into the background. Sanji rarely talks about finding the All Blue anymore. Nami's dream of mapping the entire world is mostly assumed to be happening off-screen simply because the crew keeps sailing. But the story almost never shows her actively pursuing it. And with Zoro, the narrative gradually makes becoming the Pirate King's right-hand man feel more urgent than defeating Mihawk. We know these characters will eventually achieve their dreams, but mostly because the story will require it at the end, not because we consistently see them striving towards those goals. What began as a story about people pursuing their own ambitions while supporting a captain, slowly turned into a more traditional shonen structure, where almost everything ultimately revolves around the main character. That's the difference. Frieren allows its side characters to exist as people, not tools for the protagonist. And once you give characters that kind of breathing space, something interesting starts to happen. Even the ones who barely appear on screen can end up leaving the biggest impact. Which brings us to the hero of the South. The hero of the South is the best example of impact through action. The episode in which he appears is the highest rated and the most loved episode of the season so far. His screen time is merely 7 minutes, and people are absolutely losing it over this guy. The last time a character moved me this much with so little screen time was my boy Rengoku. And when you look closely, it makes sense why. The hero of the South shares some similar traits with him. He's an idealistic character, someone people genuinely look up to. He's very stoic and carries a calm demeanor. Despite seeing his own death in the future, he doesn't try to fight it, change it, or run away from it. He guides Frieren to meet Himmel and vows to make things easier for them, fully aware of what the decision will cost him. In just a few scenes, the show tells you everything you need to know about the kind of man he was. That's the key. Frieren doesn't rely on a tragic backstory to make you care about him. It lets his actions do the work. We don't know anything about his childhood, we don't know his past struggles, we don't even know his real name. And yet, in just a few minutes, he feels like a complete character. Interestingly, this kind of storytelling technique isn't new. It's actually something that has traditionally been used for villains. Take Aizen for example. People love Aizen not because they know his past, but because of the insane things he does. The betrayals, the mind games, the sheer confidence. His aura is built entirely through his actions and presence. Even after hundreds of years, fans still barely know anything about his backstory. This trope is often used for pure evil villains or characters who just love the game of chaos. But Frieren flips that idea. Instead of using it for a villain, it applies the same technique to a hero. And the result is the hero of the South. A man who saw his own death and still walked towards it with a smile. Very few characters manage to leave such a lasting impact without a backstory. The hero of the South is one of those rare cases. But what makes Frieren's character writing truly special isn't just the ability to make you care about something quickly, it's how the show reveals the humanity inside its characters. And sometimes, the humanity shows itself through contradiction. And no one represents that better than Genau. He's the character that I'm the most excited to talk about. This guy is slowly becoming my favorite. At first glance, there's nothing about him that should make him stand out. Think about the side characters people love most in anime. Every single one of them has something that makes them immediately striking. Whether it's looks, some overpowered ability, or just the way they casually farm aura in every scene. There's always something that makes them immediately stand out. Genau has none of that. He looks completely average, and even now the show hasn't rushed to reveal what his abilities actually are. And that's exactly what makes Frieren different. The show doesn't make you fall in love with characters because of how strong they are or how cool they look. It makes you care about who they are as people, and Genau is a perfect example of that. Because everything about him is built on contradiction. On the surface, his demeanor is cool and detached. He speaks bluntly, rarely shows much emotion, and often comes across like someone who simply doesn't care. But his actions completely reveal a different person underneath. Take the baker's son for example. Genau criticizes the bread and in the same breath mentions that he won't get to eat it anymore. And this contradiction is exactly what makes him so relatable. Because so many of us do this, something bad happens and we go cold. We act like nothing bothers us. But then we see someone struggling or in pain and we can't help but offer a hand. Genau portrays this conflicted feeling perfectly. But the show pushes this contradiction even further in the next scene. When he arrives carrying his friend's dead body, he gives a detached explanation of why there was no hope for his survival. He talks nonchalantly about his friend's rotting skin and inevitable death. It sounds completely emotionless. But if you rewind the scene just a little, you see something very different. Before his death, Genau was nothing but kind and compassionate towards his childhood friend. He could have told him the truth, that everyone in the village was already dead. Instead, he pauses for a moment and decides to lie. He tells him that he will see his friends again and he will also be able to open his bakery shop. He even tries to give him a little hope by saying he's looking forward to eating his bread, even if it might be terrible. If that's not compassion, I don't know what is. And the contradictions don't just stop there. The final example appears in his conversation with Method. When his friend risks his life to save a child, Genau calls him naive and stupid. He says he would have prioritized killing the demon instead. But in the very same conversation, he reveals something very important. He tells Method not to become like him. This shows that Genau himself isn't comfortable with the kind of person he's becoming. He knows he's flawed. And then we see what's actually happening underneath the calm exterior. When he accidentally attacks Frieren, she says there was so much murderous intent in that spell, she thought he was a demon. And that line reveals something important. Behind that calm, expressionless face is an enormous amount of anger. Anger directed at the demons who caused all this suffering. But anger like that doesn't come from indifference, it comes from caring. And that's exactly why Genau's character works. He doesn't have a clean, fully formed identity yet. He says one thing and does another. He tries to act cold and pragmatic, but his actions constantly reveal his humanity. He's still figuring himself out. And this is one of Frieren's greatest strengths. The show doesn't just take you on the usual journeys we see in characters like Frieren, Fern or Stark. Sometimes it takes you on a much quieter journey. The journey of a person slowly discovering who they actually are. And riding alongside a character as they work out who they actually are is one of the most compelling things a story can do. Because it mirrors something very real. Most people are contradictions and Frieren understands that better than most shows. When you step back and look at these characters together, the real difference becomes obvious. Frieren doesn't always need to sell you a backstory. It doesn't hand you a biography or a flashback montage to tell you why you should care. It just puts you in the room with these people, shows you what they do, and trusts you to feel it. And more than anything, Frieren treats its side characters with respect. Not as plot devices or stepping stones, but as people. With lives, goals, and contradictions that exist completely independent of Frieren herself. This show can make you cry your eyes out over someone introduced 5 minutes ago. And it does it again and again. Because it understands something that most shows don't. That a character doesn't have to be a main character for the story to matter.